Alright guys, what's up? I'm back. So, I'm going to do a video on how, when to use faster baits, when to use seeker baits, things like this. Seeker baits meaning baits that cover a large area or move through areas faster, because basically if you think about it like this, 80 to 90% of the water that is in front of you whenever you're fishing doesn't contain any bass. So, this is a number that's generalized based on, volume of water by how many fish are in the water. So, I mean, really it doesn't mean anything, but if you think about it, 90% or, up to 90% of the water in front of you has no fish in it. So, with that being said, the key to a successful day bass fishing is finding the fish. So if you're fishing from the bank, or you're hiking into a location to fish and you don't have the luxury of fish finder or a portable sonar or something like that, you have to cover a lot of area quickly to locate the fish that you're hunting for. So I'm going to go over a few of these techniques for one of the guys I was telling you about in some of the other videos who just recently started bass fishing, moved down south to warm water areas of land, the large bass, bucket mouths. So trying to get him set up as much as I can with how to decide these things, but the reality of the situation is you can only learn so much until you experience it. So you're just gonna have to get out there and try. So here's what I'm gonna go over. When do you use fast baits? When do you increase the speed? When do you use a seeker bait? A seeker bait being top water baits, buzz baits, spinner baits. Crankbaits could technically be a seeker bait because they do cover a lot of area fast. And so let's get at it. So one of the things I like to do is this is all going to boil down to you have to evaluate the water that's in front of you. The water that you're trying to fish, where you're trying to locate the fish at, all of this stuff, no two waterways are the same. So you're going to have to look at this area, and you're going to have to evaluate some of these things and figure it out for yourself, because unless somebody's standing there with you looking at the water conditions, they can't really tell you, what's going to be the exact right bait for that area. Generally, worms work in all seasons, plastic worms. The jigs, jig is 100% a bass bait, at least the like a football head jig. These are baits designed to simulate crawfish. So this is for bass, largemouth, smallmouth, whatever you want to call it. It's a bass bait. So all right, what I like to do is, one, depending on the time of the year, spring, summer, fall, when the waters are warm, generally fish are more active. They have more energy because basically as the water temperatures increase, their metabolic rate increases too. They need more food. They need, they have a lot more activity. They're more active, so they need more energy to sustain this activity. This is an active fishing time. But even though the waters are warm and it's June outside, it doesn't necessarily mean that the fish are going to be extremely active. There's a lot of factors that go into this. Could be something like barometric pressure. Barometric pressure is on the rise. Generally, the fish are pretty much moving around. Higher pressure means that fish are more comfortable in all levels of the water. But this is not necessarily 100% all the time either. So, you have to consider things like oxygen content, low dissolved oxygen content in the water. Like say it's the middle of the summer, the water levels are low, hasn't rained in a long time. There may be low, like if the body of water you're fishing in doesn't have like water running into it, a steady feed of churned up, water with dissolved oxygen in it, the dissolved oxygen content could be lower. This could mean lethargic and slower fish. So, all right, so with summertime in Texas, because that's where he's at, if the water is, say, very clear, so super clear to ultra clear. Ultra clear is 6 feet plus visibility in the water. That means if you were to put a green worm on, cast it out, and you can see it 6, 8, 10 feet down in the water, that is ultra clear water. So although bass aren't, say, don't have as acute a vision as, say, a trout, they still can see pretty good underwater. They are sight hunters. They are predatory, and they generally will ambush or even chase fish, their prey down. So, everything has to be taken into account. And even with all of the information and all your ducks in a row, you still might not catch any fish. So, ultra clear water, 4 to 6 feet visibility, you're going to want to use faster baits. Faster. You don't want these fish to have time to scope out what you're pulling through the water slowly. They're like, oh, well, what? That looks enticing, but it doesn't look exactly enticing, so they may not go for it. If you cast out, generally strikes happen whenever you cast a bait out. Like say you're casting a jig out, the strikes generally happen on the sink, the first sink. As you throw the bait in, it splashes on the top of the water, gets everything's attention, and then as it sinks to the bottom, they go for it. Boom. So ultra clear water, warm weather, varying barometric pressures or weather conditions, and water oxygen content. Bigger baits, faster. Don't give the fish enough time to scope your bait out and decide that they don't want it. Zip it through there, pull it past them, and then make or break, hit it or don't. So that's generally how I decide whether I'm going to use a faster bait. Seeker baits, which are generally the faster baits anyways, could be a description of a fast bait. If I'm to a new area and say I just pull into a cove or something, I come up on a cove in a lake, and I have a wide area, shallow water, varying different degrees of cover, vertical structure, rock overhangs, a lot of log jam debris in the bottom of the water. But you have a lot of area that you want to cover to find those fish that are in there. I'm going to use a faster bait first. Pull a buzz bait across the top of the water when you first get there. If there's an active fish out there that is, on the hunt, they may go right for it. So that may give you an idea of, how the fish are acting in that area that day. So, I would love to be able to give you all of the pointers, every exact answer that you're looking for, man. But the reality of the situation is, you can get so many pointers, but even the best bass fishermen in the world still learn from a bad season or a bad day. The best lessons learned are generally the hardest ones, or the most painful ones. So, say you make a trip, you plan a trip out for months in advance, you invest a bunch of money into it, you go to this new location you've never been before, you don't catch a single fish. Well, guess what? You just learned a lesson, Take it, accept it, learn from it, move on. Test it out, man. I try to keep as much gear on me as I possibly can because I never know what the fish are going to do. But with that being said, fast baits, clear water, ultra clear water, warm water, exceptionally active fishing locations, fast baits, big baits. But you know what? It doesn't necessarily have to be a giant bait to get a big bass. In the springtime with bass, just start getting active, you could catch an 8-pound bass on that little guy right there. You could catch an 8-pound bass on that little guy, a little bladed spinner. The size of your bait doesn't technically mean the size, it isn't going to necessarily equate to the size of the fish that you catch. I mean, generally, you're not going to catch a half-ounce bass on a giant bait like this, but it's not impossible, So, you see some pictures sometimes, people will pull a little bitty tiny bass out, and the bait that they went after is bigger than the fish itself. So, only thing I can tell you, man, is experiment, try it out, But like I said, definitely put forth the effort to try to read your surroundings, look at what's going on in the water. And another thing that a lot of people overlook, a lot of times, I see it all the time when I go to the lakes, I'm watching somebody fish, just checking out the technique or something. A lot of people overlook the break. That's what I call it, is the break. So when you get to a location, just because right up at the bank the water's only 8-10 inches deep, that doesn't mean you don't fish there, man. Try it. Don't forget, close to the bank. Fish aren't necessarily straight out from where you're standing. That's not how it works. Bass enjoy structure. They seek out areas where they can hide in the shadows, ambush, fish that swim past, things like this. Look for these locations, rock overhangs, vertical structure, especially in deeper water. You know, if you got lots of stump logs or a flooded wooded area that has lots of standing dead trees, bass love these locations. You know, they like the edges of grass lines. Pull a spinnerbait, you know, down the edge of a weed line, you know, 12, 15, 18 feet out from the bank. That's a prime ambush location. Fast bait, you know, lipless crank seal or crankbait, lipless, you know, or even a lipped crankbait. You got things like beetle spins, you know, jointed swim baits, freaking anything, man. You know, just little food for thought. I once made a bet with my brother, my kid brother, when we were younger, that I could take a golden one brass hook, a push button rod, and nothing but blades of grass to use for bait. And he bet me that I couldn't catch a bass like that. I'm gonna tell you right now, I did, and I have done it multiple times just to make sure it wasn't a fluke. Anything can be enticing to a fish, you know. It's all about presentation. So experiment with it. Work on your technique. You know what? There's tons and tons of YouTube videos out there about people who are way more qualified at fishing. Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I have a lot of experience fishing, but you know, everybody has a little bit difference to their technique. Everybody has a little bit, you know, a preference to their, you know, their presentation or their go-to fishing bait. Personally, my go-to has always been jigs and worms. I love them. It's always what I've caught the most fish on. It's what I was the most comfortable with. But things like this, man, this is going to be up to you to decide. So don't shy away from buying more bait, man. Or more lures. You can never have too much artificial. There's always something you don't have. There's always something that may work better in a certain situation. So fast waters or clear, ultra clear waters and clear waters, warm water, high oxygen content with active fish, you're going to want to use fast bait. If fast bait's not working for you in the location you're at, switch it up to a worm. Slow it down a little bit. Change your presentation. Maybe change your color, change your weight size, something like this. You know, these little changes can make a big difference. Don't be afraid to use jerk bait. Don't be afraid to try new things like, you know, wobbling head jig rigs. You know, things like this. Every different type of rig, every different type of setup, sliding your weight up a little bit, staking it at a different location changes the presentation and the action of your bait. So give it a shot, man. All right, well, I hope that was more of what you were looking for. So later this weekend, I'm gonna do some more videos. I got you know, me and Kyle, Jacob, you know him. Other people aren't gonna really know who he is, but he will be in a video with me this weekend. He's another southern guy. He's from Alabama, Lake Eufaula area. So we got a Lake Eufaula, you know, seasoned veteran bass fishing in you know, swampy southern areas. Some of you might know Eufaula because Bass Pro Tour was just there not several months ago. I think it was kind of a washout, you know, a lot of rain and stuff, but still a good location. Technically not as good as you know, the Okefenokee and swampy areas where I like to fish at, but you know, he's a good bass fisherman, seasoned, experienced. We're gonna see if we can't go do a little bass and trout attack this weekend at the lake. I'm gonna hit up some of the Deep Creek end before we get to the lake. Promised some people that I would do a little bit of trout footage for them. You know, I had pretty good success this early spring, late winter for trout in deep creeks. I'm going to go over some of the methods I used. So check it out, people. Jacob, keep trying, man. You'll get it.